What's poppin', Acolytes? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. Spoilers ahead for the finale of Season 1 of The Acolyte, because we've got to talk about the crazy things that happened in this damn episode. So if you have not seen the episode, please stop this video, go watch the episode, and then come back here, because again, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, and there's a really big thing that happens in this episode that I do not want to have spoiled for you, so please watch the episode, then come back here. Anyways, whatever, let's just get into it. The episode picks up where episode 6 left off, with Osha breathing heavily while wearing Qimir's Cortosis mask, a mask purposely designed to help her strengthen her connection to the dark side of the Force. This being the case, while being isolated in that darkness with only her inner anger and rage as her company, she was able to access the dark side of the cosmic force to be able to see the future, with Osha seeing what she mistakenly believed was her sister Mae force choking her former Jedi Master Saul to death. And while she was having these visions, her deep connection to the dark side of the Force, combined with her extremely high midichlorian count, causes her to accidentally trigger her dark-sided witch possession ability onto Qimir, who, thanks to his own mastery of the dark side of the Force, was able to brute force his way out of Osha's enchantment to remove the helmet from Osha's head. This moment is a prime example of why the cosmic force is so dangerous in Star Wars, man, because accessing the cosmic force to look into the future usually does nothing but make whoever looked into the future experience great fear. And that fear of the future tends to tempt the person experiencing it towards doing dark-sided actions in order to keep that dark future from happening. But despite their efforts to defy fate, they usually end up dark-side goofing their way into that very future. I mean, we saw it happen to Anakin Skywalker during the prequels, when his cosmic force visions of Padme's death during childbirth led him into becoming the ultra-dark and selfish Darth Vader, and a man that would end up choking Padme and personally escorting her towards death's door. And we also saw it happen with Anakin's son, Luke Skywalker, when Luke's cosmic force visions of Ben Solo becoming the next Darth Vader caused him to ignite his lightsaber against his nephew, personally escorting Ben towards becoming the very monster that he feared to make. And in this episode, we of course inevitably see this happen to Osha, when her fear of the future would lead her to exactly what she was trying to avoid in the first place, with her inevitably being the one to choke the life out of Saul without a lightsaber by the end of the episode, cementing her role as the stranger's new acolyte, which is why this finale is simply called The Acolyte, being the first episode title of the season to not have any ties to the overall duality theme. But anyways, the Star Wars animation Star Wars Visions has a really great episode about this very concept in its first season with its 9th episode called Akakiri. I highly suggest you all give that one a watch because it's all about the fear of fate and how that fear could end up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. But anyways, after telling Qimir of her vision, the both of them agreed to carpool to Brendok together before starting their race to Mae, with the show then transitioning us to Saul and Mae, after Saul had told Mae his perspective of the tragic events on Brendok 16 years prior. Saul then informs Mae that they've arrived on Brendok in order for Saul to prove to Vernestra and the Jedi of the presence of a Vergence in the Force on the planet. When Mae gets angry at Saul for what she sees as Saul trying to justify the murder of her mother, Saul tries to tell Mae that he was just doing what he believed was right for the safety of both her and her sister, because that was what he primarily cared about, with Saul about to tell Mae about her and Osha being two halves of one whole person before Mae would use Dark Pip to free herself and give Saul the old electric titty twister before stealing one of the Jedi ships for herself and kicking off a chase with Saul through the ring of asteroids orbiting one of Brendok's moons. And when Saul engages his targeting systems and starts to aim at one of Mae's wings, Basil, the goat of the series, comes in and sees that Saul's obsession with possessing Mae was going to get her and possibly themselves all killed, prompting the little tiny alien to rip out the cables inside of Saul's ship, causing the ship to slow down and tip over, with the resulting splash of asteroids sending Mae careening down towards the surface of Brendok. Then we get a classic Star Wars wipe to the planet Coruscant, where Jedi Master Vernestra gets a surprise visit from Senator Rayancourt, played by actor David Harewood. When they first meet up in this episode, Senator Rayancourt asks Vernestra if her stomach is okay following her recent journey through hyperspace, with Vernestra correcting him just like she corrected Padawan Mog Adana in the previous episode by saying that hyperspace only negatively affects her head, again alluding to Vernestra's innate ability to experience extremely strong force visions of the future whenever she enters hyperspace, a power that was first introduced in the pages of the High Republic Out of the Shadows from 2021. Rayancourt's surprise visit was apparently brought upon by him learning of the Jedi's extremely sketchy and unethical action of not reporting a whole-ass murder investigation to the Senate, as is normally customary. After Vernestra reluctantly tells him that the investigation involves the murder of multiple Jedi, Rayancourt begins to read the Jedi like a goddamn book, letting Vernestra know that him pushing for an external review of the Jedi was not some personal vendetta, but instead Rayancourt's ability to see the Jedi for who they really were, a cult of powerful and prideful individuals who are blind to how their emotions rule them, or how that blind and unchecked power could end up becoming a major threat to the galaxy should one of these emotionally stunted people snap. And Rayancourt is exactly right. Like I've been saying throughout all of my breakdowns of this series, the major flaw of the Jedi was their inability to recognize how their doctrine of burying emotions like fear, anger, and love has caused them to become arrogantly blind towards how those very emotions can secretly motivate their actions. And we can see this plain and simple through Vernestra in this episode, whose own fear of losing political power in the Senate has caused her to not only practice deception towards the Jedi High Council and the Senate, but would also ultimately lead her to lie about Sol's fate at the end of the episode, choosing to frame her colleague for dark actions and crimes that he did not commit for what she believed was the greater good at the end of the day. And much like I brought up before, this is also a prime example of how the cosmic force can lead anyone towards fearfully trying to defy fate, as Vernestra's own strong connection to the cosmic force, especially when she's in the middle of hyperspace, has caused her to have great fear of a coming great unbalancing of the force, with that fear of the cosmic scales tipping causing her to feel the urge to do whatever it takes to prevent the Jedi from losing political power. Because if they lose political power, then they can't protect the galaxy as well. And again, much like I brought up in previous breakdowns, this is extremely reflective of what Mace Windu and his band of Jedi did during the future era of the prequels, with their blindness towards their own fear causing them to ask Anakin to illegally and unethically spy on a sitting senator after that senator intervened in Jedi affairs. All Palpatine did from a political standpoint was make Anakin his own personal representative on the council. But since only members of the Jedi Council could be political representatives, the Jedi felt like Senator Palpatine was wrong for trying to force Anakin into becoming a Jedi Master without their approval, leading the Jedi to try to convince Anakin to spy on Palpatine instead to try to see what he was up to. Vernestra is acting exactly like her bald purple lightsaber buddy from the future, completely ignoring the rule of law because they feel called by the religious practices to do what they believe is right no matter what. And Rayancourt is wise enough to see that no matter how righteous the Jedi claim to be, at the end of the day, they're all just flawed feeling people, just like every other person in the galaxy. And my favorite line of Rayancourt's during this exchange is when he says, "When you're looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you." And man, oh man, did I feel like he was talking directly to a specific chunk of the Star Wars fandom that have been very vocally displeased with how this series has begun to put a spotlight on the flawed, hypocritical nature of the Jedi, with those people feeling like Disney Star Wars is on submission to paint the heroic Jedi as the bad guys. But that's not really accurate at all, because just because you might look up to the Jedi as heroes, your love for the Jedi doesn't make their dark-sided actions throughout the prequels go away. It just makes it easier to excuse any of their unethical and un-Jedi-like actions away, because peacekeeping space monks couldn't possibly ever do fear-based selfish things, right? Wrong! And that is what Rayancourt is trying to get Vernestra to see, and it very much ties into the overall yin-yang theme of the series. Rayancourt is like, yo, remember how the light side of a yin-yang has a dark side? I do, and because of that, the Jedi are not exempt from dark-sided emotions. But unfortunately, an arrogant and hard-hearted Vernestra ain't trying to hear all that. Then the show transitions back to Osha and Qimir about to head off planet to find Mae, with Qimir again asking Osha to train with him, and Osha being insistent once again that she's not as easily swayed as her sister. But right after this, the most hype and intriguing moment of the episode occurs when the figure of a robed Mun alien emerges from the entrance of Qimir's home, with this figure being none other than the famous Sith Lord Darth Plagueis the Wise, first mentioned by Senator Palpatine at the opera in Revenge of the Sith when he first introduces Anakin to Darth Plagueis' dark-sided mastery of midichlorians to create and sustain life. The deep-voiced choir heard in the background in this moment is a direct reference to this opera scene from Revenge of the Sith, and it's a music cue often associated with Darth Plagueis' legacy, much like we heard during Season 2 of The Mandalorian when Mando and the gang discovered Palpatine's laboratory of Supreme Leader Snoke clones, a laboratory that was constructed as a consequence of Sheev Palpatine learning the dark-sided science of life preservation from his former master Darth Plagueis, as he would use that science to preserve his life after Darth Vader would throw him down that shaft in Return of the Jedi. Up until this point, not much has been established about Darth Plagueis in the current Star Wars canon, but the non-canon Legends material has gone extensively into Plagueis' history in past books, especially within the pages of James Luceno's Darth Plagueis novel from 2012. Having been born Higo Damask II, this Mun alien would become the apprentice to a Sith Lord named Darth Tenebris, and would get his name Darth Plagueis from that Sith Lord. But what is particularly interesting about Plagueis' former master, in my opinion, is that Darth Tenebris was actually responsible for the creation of a concept called maxichlorians. In the Legends continuity, Darth Tenebris would create these maxichlorians by infecting some of the midichlorians in his blood with a retrovirus that turned those midichlorians into maxichlorians. And basically what maxichlorians allowed Tenebris to do was preserve his consciousness into these microscopic symbiotes at the moment of his death, and then shoot those microbes out of his body to live inside someone else. And that's exactly what Darth Tenebris did when his apprentice Darth Plagueis would mortally wound him by crushing the top of a cortosis cave onto him. And when Darth Tenebris died, he transferred his consciousness into Darth Plagueis, with Tenebris' main goal being to hop from Sith Lord to Sith Lord until the birth of the prophesied Chosen One, with the Chosen One being Darth Tenebris' ideal body. Now, even though this would ultimately not work out for Darth Tenebris himself in Legends, I feel like there's a chance here that Lucasfilm could be secretly adapting this previously non-canon concept of maxichlorian consciousness transfers and have begun to use it to explain how Palpatine could have managed to learn how to preserve his life force after death, and also why Palpatine tends to wholeheartedly welcome someone stronger than him striking him down in anger like he does with Luke in Return of the Jedi. Because if Palpatine were to learn this maxichlorian science from his former master Darth Plagueis, who learned from Darth Tenebris, then we could be looking at a scenario where this Darth Plagueis that we've been introduced to in this series could be looking for an acolyte for the purposes of eventually possessing outright, with Qimir merely being a human puppet that Plagueis is using to manipulate Osha or Mae into becoming his next vessel, much like how Palpatine would use Supreme Leader Snoke from the shadows in order to manipulate both Kylo Ren and Rey. I have a feeling that Qimir is secretly Darth Plagueis himself, just Darth Plagueis using someone else's body as an avatar to manipulate, just like Palpatine did with Snoke's clone body. And I feel like this could have been teased when we first met Qimir at the beginning of the series, with Qimir having stolen the clothes and job of an apothecary dude just so he can blend in and not draw any attention to himself. So, in a similar vein, I feel like we could be looking at Plagueis finding Qimir at some point in his past, possessing Qimir's body, and then talking through Qimir like Palpatine talked through Snoke, just so he could find an extremely powerful vessel to sustain him. Because let's be real, Darth Plagueis is not as hot as Manny Jacinto. And if a creepy looking motherfucker like that was like, hey, come join me, embrace the dark side, you would probably be like, absolutely not. You're going to betray me and do something weird to me, you weird alien man. And with Osha and Mae's radically unnatural birth through the Force, those two midichlorian powerhouses could be Plagueis' next prime targets. But regardless of whether or not this hypothesis is correct, the presence of Plagueis in this series definitely raises the likelihood of this tale acting as an origin story for how Anakin Skywalker would eventually become born through the Force, with Plagueis potentially learning how to manipulate midichlorians to create life by experiencing Osha and Mae's stories through Qimir, slowly gathering intel to bolster the power of the Sith to hopefully one day cosmically manufacture the Chosen One himself through weird-ass witchcraft. And hey, I don't mean to spread rumors, but word on the street is your ass likes wearing shirts Well, good news for you, we've got a new Star Wars themed shirt over on our website that says Sith Happens. And no one knows that Sith happens more than Jackie and Yord. So check that new shirt out and maybe even consider buying one or some for yourself or somebody that you love, because doing so really helps out the channel a whole lot. But anyways, the show then continues with Saul having landed on Brendok before turning his transponder beacon on his ship on and heading out to find Mae. When Venestra learns where Saul's location is, she immediately ventures off to Brendok with as many Jedi as she can assemble on the low without raising suspicion from the Council or the Senate. As Osha and Qimir arrive on the planet, Saul watches their ship approach the surface while standing in front of the cliffside chasm that the witches of Brendok used to worship and perform ceremonies in front of before Jedi Master Trinity from the Matrix made them all collapse like Andy's toys from Toy Story. And then when Saul uses Force telemetry to focus in on Mae's rage and pain, he finds himself in front of the bridge that Mae and Osha stood on before their unfortunate separation 16 years ago. But before Saul could realize that he successfully followed the Force to Mae, he leaves out of shame, with Mae then symbolically climbing out of that very hole she fell down 16 years ago to once again confront her past. Meanwhile, when Osha and Qimir arrive at the old elevator entrance to the Coven, Qimir vanishes into thin air instead of opting to climb the side of the mountain or waiting for Osha to hack the console, kind of making me wonder if Qimir had somehow managed to learn how to make himself disappear into smoke, much like how Mother Anastasia and Coral knew how to do in the past. This is shortly followed by Qimir running into Saul himself and thanking him for leading Osha to him, telling Saul that they both make a great team when it comes to leading Osha towards the dark side, with Qimir saying that to poke at Saul's guilt for not being a good enough teacher to get Osha to let go of her past pain. And as the two fight, notice this moment of Qimir menacingly walking towards Saul with his lightsaber down, while Saul backs up with his lightsaber up, as this shows that their past battle has thoroughly gotten Saul to greatly fear the stranger and his capacity to bring death. And shortly after this, Saul tells Qimir that he will destroy him if he must, to which Qimir replies, "Not if she gets you first," with Qimir showing that he already knows that Osha's vision actually showed Osha killing Saul and not Mae killing Saul like Osha believed. And a little bit later in this battle, I love how when Qimir throws both of his lightsabers at Saul, Saul deactivates his lightsaber to channel his force powers to push Qimir and his weapons away, because this is exactly what Jedi are supposed to use their powers for, purely for the purposes of defense. A dark-sided Saul would have used force push repeatedly to aggressively attempt to crush Qimir against a wall, much like Kilnaka used force push against his friends 16 years ago. But only true Jedi only use their force push powers to save others or themselves. And as the two dudes fight, both Osha and Mae reunite in their old charred bedroom, with Osha revealing to Mae that Saul never actually blamed Mae for the fire, but was trying to teach Osha to let go of her hatred towards Mae and her sadness towards their mother's death. This is before Mae would reveal to Osha that it was Saul who was actually responsible for that pain to begin with. That revelation causes Osha to scream and to violently attack out of anger, while Mae herself is much more calm in her movements and actions, showing just how much the both of them have started to move away towards the opposite sides of the force spectrums that they actually started on at the beginning of the series, and their new clothing actually reflects this, with Osha now wearing black and Mae wearing white. Then, after we get this excellent kick transition from Osha and Mae's fight back to Saul and Qimir, Saul notices the Jedi arriving on Brendok and tells Qimir that he's about to pay for everything that he's done. However, at the sight of the Jedi's arrival, Mae would quickly leave her fight with Osha to go confront Saul and disarm him of his lightsaber. This causes her former master to encourage her to embrace her anger and strike Saul down in order to complete her journey towards the dark side, harkening back to Palpatine telling Luke Skywalker to do the same in Return of the Jedi. However, instead of using the lightsaber to strike Saul down, Mae does what Luke Skywalker would do in Episode 6 and toss Saul's lightsaber away, instead stating that Saul should confess what he did and stand trial in front of both the Jedi Council and the Senate. Saul then follows that up by insisting to Mae that he was doing what he thought was right by trying to protect the both of them from being misused as tools of power for a coven that uses unnatural dark forces. Then he finally gets to reveal to Mae what he was trying to tell her earlier on the ship, that both Osha and Mae are two halves of one person, created by their mothers through a force vergence on Brendok. And as soon as Saul says this, check out Qimir's reaction, as it seems like the gears in Qimir's head are beginning to turn as to how he could potentially use this information to his advantage, learning how to create his own ultra-powerful life form later on. And this could actually be the very moment Darth Plagueis would learn that this power was possible, if Plagueis is somehow experiencing everything that Qimir is experiencing anyway. Then after Mae gets Saul to confess that he killed Mother Osha in front of Osha, Osha confronts Saul for all of his lies, with Saul then telling Osha that he did everything so that Osha could have her dream of becoming a Jedi. And right before Saul could tell Osha that he loved her for the very first time in his life, Osha would angrily reach out to the dark side of the Force and choke her former master to death while simultaneously bleeding the Kyber crystal inside of Saul's lightsaber, turning his blade from blue to red, with this being the first time Kyber crystal bleeding has been shown in live action. The closest thing to this that we've gotten is in Jedi Survivor, when the fallen Jedi Dagan Gera would bleed his lightsaber in front of Cal Kestis. And while this is all happening, the Jedi arrive on Brendok, with Vernestra's strong Force sensitivity allowing her to instantaneously detect the presence of Qimir, who apparently used to be a former Jedi Padawan of hers, and very likely the one that gave Qimir his nasty back scar, as many people on the internet have theorized a few weeks ago. This causes Qimir to immediately throw on his helmet and run, while Mae leads Osha down the generator chasm towards the core tunnel that she fell into when she was a kid. And when the Jedi arrive at the site of Saul's death, Vernestra uses Force telemetry to feel the events of the past that transpired there, before almost catching Qimir watching her from afar. This then leads to the girls' escape towards the Bunta tree that they used to hang around when they were little, with Qimir showing up not long after them, telling them that the Jedi were going to find them if he could find them so easily, which is true, as Basil was leading the Jedi towards them as they spoke. Mae, finally learning how to let her sister go do what she wants without her, agrees to have her memory wiped by Qimir so the Jedi cannot gather any intel from her, which was an insanely selfless and light-sided act. An act that would essentially start Mae off with a clean slate. The two then hug goodbye, with Osha promising to find her, an ending that reminds me a lot of the heartbreaking memory-wiping ending of Spider-Man No Way Home. And after the Jedi find a memory-wiped Mae, they bring her back to Coruscant, where she is interrogated by Vernestra, with Mae only remembering bits and pieces of the traumatic pain of her loss 16 years ago when she was 8, making Mae and Osha 24 years old. And since Mae only remembers the part when Saul murdered Mother Osha, this allows Vernestra the window to lie to both Mae and the Senate by blaming the slaughter of the Coven on Brendok on the 4 Jedi stationed there in the past, and pinning the murder of all of the Jedi on Kolfar on Saul in order to keep the Jedi from getting in political trouble, ending this season with the Jedi performing a massively hypocritical, dark-sided act. But hey, at least Vernestra gave Saul a proper Jedi cremation like Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin Skywalker received, so you know, that's nice. And then after Osha and Qimir hold hands on planet Plagueis, the final scene of the series has Vernestra approaching a much younger Jedi Master Yoda, who was around 764 years old at the time during the events of this show. A whole ass spring chicken, and it's unknown exactly what Vernestra wants with Yoda, but given that Vernestra just learned that her old apprentice Qimir is alive and on the dark side, she's probably going to relay that information to Yoda to seek his wisdom. Either that, or Vernestra is seeking some clarity on a prophetic Force vision that she might have experienced while in hyperspace, something that Jedi have been known to do in the prequel era in the past, because Yoda is an extremely wise man. But either way, the introduction of both Darth Plagueis and Yoda in the series definitely elevates the Acolyte to must-see TV for all fans of Star Wars, and I cannot wait for what a Season 2 will offer us when the show is inevitably renewed, because this is a tale of dualities after all, a tale that is only halfway done with being told. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching this breakdown of the finale for The Acolyte. You guys are amazing. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever I am. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube. And when you do, make sure you hit that notification bell to get notifications for every time we upload a video. And hey, if you guys want to support the channel, head on over to the Heavy Spoiler store to pick up our new Sith Happen shirt. It is an amazing shirt and you will look really good in it, so buy that shirt today. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.